Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of the Lumiere Learning Monday. We are on season 5, and this is episode 6. And my guest today is author, journalist, thinker Saumya Roy. Saumya, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Saumya, you and I connected as recently as now when I was so inspired when you talked about your book, Mountain Tales. And we're going to tell the audience a little bit about the book, which you wrote in 2022. But I do want you to give them a context, a little bit about what shaped your sensibilities, a little bit about the journey towards becoming this aware, informed person that's looking to wake people up.
Sure. I would say that it's, I started as a journalist. I trained as a journalist, worked as a journalist for over a decade. I worked for different publications, including Mint and then Bloomberg and, a bunch of different places. And I wrote about any and everything, Outlook. So I wrote about any and everything from stock markets to a little bit of even Bollywood celebrities but a lot of business and economic stuff. So while I used to cover the stock market, one of the stories that I had done was about redlining, which, if you remember, at that time India's economy was booming, like in the mid 2000s. The stock market was doing very well, and there was personal finance boom. So a lot of people would get these phone calls saying, do you want a credit card, do you want a personal loan for, like, weddings, for holidays. People were traveling abroad, that EMI culture, etc. So I happened to speak to some people who said that, look, we get these phone calls, and the minute we tell them where we live, they say, no, you are not eligible for anything. And these were two kinds of people. One was people who lived in any kind of informal settlement, and two was religious minorities. So they were often told, like, they were living in pakka houses and buildings and old buildings, but they were told, look, we can't give you a loan. And so I began to ask them, well, why is that, right? And some of them, yes, okay, they don't have, you could say that from a banking perspective, they don't have a regular monthly job, which, if you now think about it, it's become so common, right? Freelancing, working from
Yeah.
home, etc. But at the time, those people were told, look, you don't have a regular monthly wage paying job, and so we can't give you anything. And the second lot was people who just belonged to religious minorities, and they did have jobs, they had everything, but they were told, look, you can't. And so I looked into it and found that banks across the world, but also in India, have a practice of redlining, wherein people, they feel they can't recover loans for their own subjective reasons, can't get loans. So I began to kind of study that. We did the story, everything. And then later, some years later, I set up my own foundation to give small loans, interest free loans. It was a non-profit foundation. So giving very low interest loans to people in urban and rural areas who just wanted to set up small businesses, etc. And at some point, while giving these loans, it just became a wonderful kind of insight into a bottom up view of Mumbai, so to say. So we began to get like micro entrepreneurs of all kinds in our office, like including street vendors who may be selling food or snacks, or just women who did home based businesses like tailoring, cobblers. Women who made some food, like lunches at home. So it became like almost like a mosaic. You were seeing like bottom up of the city, like women who made stuffed toys, all the different communities. And one of the communities that we began to get was waste pickers who worked on the landfill of Mumbai. And so right from the minute they came, I used to ask them, oh, what is it that you do? And
Yeah.
how are you going to use the loan? Like, if you pick up waste with your own hands, then how are you going to use the loan? And
Yeah.
right from the beginning, what they used to tell me was, no, you have no idea how vast the place that we work is, how endless the waste that comes here is. Like, you could be a millionaire picking this waste, because it's never going to stop coming, and our business can grow like any business can grow. And so that's when I began to go there, research this place, and it became evident to me pretty early on that, wow, like, this is a place that needs to be told about, written about, known about.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. So, you know how one thing leads to the other, and you kind of sort of from that, literally the word you use, mosaic of the body of work you were doing in your writing and your journalistic work, you almost sort of started gravitating towards the almost the marginalized, or the people on the fringes who were redlined, or who had the no access to credit or legitimate ways to grow their work and their business.
Yeah, that's right. So the other part of our foundation was we also worked in rural Maharashtra and Vidarbha, where farmer suicides were going on, and that I had also written about. So we began working with widows of farmers who committed suicide, and I would say that was a very um,
Grim.
like I'm very attached to that work that I did as well. And then yeah, I mean, increasingly just going to the landfill of Mumbai, meeting these people. And as you know, in 2016 there were these huge fires at Deonar
Yeah.
dumping ground, and the waste pickers were telling me about how they were getting called into the police station. Some of them were getting arrested, interrogated, and the whole narrative in the media was that, oh, these waste pickers, they are all gangsters, they are all mafia, and they're lighting fires to this garbage dump to get metal, which could be precious metal as well. And the waste pickers were constantly talking to me about how, like, if this is how we live, why would we set fire to this place, right? And so, which, may or may not, neither narrative may be entirely true, but it was clear to me then that this place, which is about 320 acres large, millions of metric tons of waste, all of the waste that the city was sending there, needed to be written about, because it was also a statement about how we live and what impact that has.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was actually watching another interview you did with NDTV some time back, and there you actually talk about the history of, and your book covers that as well, the history of Devnar dumping grounds. And for someone who's lived in Mumbai all my life, I didn't even know about this. So those are things, like you say, we've almost sort of, they are invisible because we've allowed them to be invisible.
Yeah, that is, yeah. Actually, it's funny how so much of this came from the waste pickers themselves. So we had this one waste picker who was really the first person who came to us, and she said, "You have no idea. This place is like a gold mine." And I'm like, "You're talking about that smelly garbage dump?" And she was like, "Yeah, you need to come." So she would take me there, and she would show me the place, and she would tell me all these crazy, fantastical stories, like, you have no idea. Garbage would come by truck, and I thought this woman is like this, so by train. There was a train that was specially to bring garbage, and I'm standing on this garbage heap and thinking, is this woman like delusional? What is she talking about? And she said, no, no, garbage would come by train. And so that kind of sent me on this. I would say that I had it at the back of my mind that, is this woman delusional? Is it true? And so it's once it happened that I was at the British Library and I began to look at records on this. And for a while, nothing was coming up. And then suddenly, I think it was at the Bodleian, I was looking at old municipal commissioners' records, and it said there was a garbage train, a kachra train, and it used to come. It was basically the way this garbage dump was set up was that there was the plague in Mumbai in 1895, 96, 97, and then when they looked at the causes of the plague, they said it's because the city is growing so quickly, which, if you think about it, is so sort of so much of what is happening even today. You'll associate with so
Yeah.
much of what is happening today. That so there was. It was cramped, and there were these slim lanes, and there was a lot of garbage, and the garbage was leading to rats. So how do we clean this? Basically, as a way of mitigating the plague, we need to take away the rats and we need to take away the garbage, and the way to do that is to basically send away garbage somewhere and send it by train. So there was a kachra train that ran for almost 7 or 8 decades, and
Wow.
yeah, so all the kachra of the city would get filled into this train and be sent from Mahalakshmi to Deonar, and it would
Mhm.
be emptied at Deonar dumping ground. And that is how this swampy land, which was at one point 820 acres, if I remember correctly, is now 320 acres. But that
It
is
must
how,
have, yeah, so it was swampy land. So it must have been part of the mangroves, or, at that time, maybe it wasn't even,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it was mangrove. They say that it was mangrove in the old records, and because they were looking for a place to send this garbage to, and they said, yeah, this is just a mangrove. And actually, their idea was that when this filled up, as you can imagine, at that time this was mostly organic waste, right? Like food waste. There was not
Yeah.
plastic or something. So their idea, this was a money making scheme, by the way. So their plan was that when this filled up, this would be given to farmers, like it would become agricultural land, and the government would make money on it,
Oh,
right?
so
Um,
interesting.
yeah. So as it happened, it did fill up, and slowly much of Emmy's ward is made on that land. So it was, since it was 800 and maybe 50 odd acres, much of Emmy's ward is built on what was Deonar dumping ground.
So this is M East, huh?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. In fact, in your book and in your interview, you talk about following 8 families and
yeah,
their lives. So it's almost like 4 families over 8 years. So it's almost like a longitudinal research you've done. So these people were comfortable talking, and how was the research process? How did you actually? And of course, that's your skill as a journalist, but it would be hugely useful to see how you went about the
yeah.
study.
So here I should say that I had a pre-existing relationship with them through my foundation. So we gave them like basically very low interest loans. So like we are registered as a non-profit, so very low interest loans. And so I had a pre-existing relationship with them, and they would always say that you have no idea. Nobody ever comes there. Nobody ever knows what this place is really like. So they had an interest in this place being known, but I was not, even at the beginning for a few years. I was not writing about it. When the fires happened, they felt victimized. And
Hmm.
so at first I thought, look, why don't I just write a magazine story? So I called
Hmm.
them, I said, look, I'm calling you. It's not, or I would visit them and I said, look, this is not about money. So let's put that relationship aside. And do you just want to tell me about your life? Like just anything you want to tell me.
Sure.
And so I remember they felt a kind of relief. Like one of the old women who used to help me right at the beginning, Salma, who's since passed away right after the book came out, and she said, "Aap na video leke aao. If you really want to show how we live, nobody will believe. Like words are not enough."
Wow.
Right.
Hmm.
And obviously you're not allowed to film there. Even getting in became more and more difficult as time passed, and lots of security cameras, all kind of things. But they wanted that, like, somebody should, their marginalization was so complete that they wanted somebody to know what difficult lives they had lived.
Yeah. And I haven't really literally after when I was researching to do our conversation, this has been so top of mind for me, and I've been looking over social media on what I can find about the book. Your book has sparked a lot of interest outside of India as well. And tell us a little bit about, the theme that you picked. You've called it Mountain Tales, Castaway Mountain. So I find these names, I find love and lost as some themes, and it's part of your title. I love the book cover. So,
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I think the reason is that, I mean, I think my entry point into this was through the waste pickers, and my connection really with them, and therefore wanting to show their lives. I think when I would talk to, I felt a disconnect between the way people were perceiving this place. Like a lot of people didn't know about Deonar, or the communities that live off of the dumping ground. And when you did tell them, the idea was that this would be a very dark place. Oh, you shouldn't go there, you'll fall sick. Oh my god, there are gangsters there. Or oh my god, waste. Oh my god, it must be stinking and like an unpleasant place to be. But in fact, in my interactions with them, the last thing it was unpleasant, right? Like it was in my
wow.
interaction here. I loved going there, I should tell you. There was the idea, when as I followed them, there were birthday parties being celebrated there were love affairs, there were
Wow.
weddings, babies being born, in whatever way they could. Like even through that waste, they were following the fashions of the city, they were following the
Wow.
food trends of the city. Like right at the beginning, I've written about how, like, as ready to eat foods came into the market, When those dates would expire, like right at that time, like on the date, the day the food would expire, it would be sent to the garbage dump. And so these kids, it would be a party for them, right? Like they would go and like dig through the garbage, pull out like apples, and they knew, oh my god, these are not Indian apples, these are Washington apples, or like these are
Mm.
Japanese apples, or these are ready to eat gulab jamun. So they would make it and eat it. So it's also showing how consumer culture was petering down
Yeah.
their lives. And there was darkness, there was tremendous darkness, which I've not shied away from writing, because many of them, through the writing of this book, got sick, got tuberculosis, got asthma, died, all of that. But there was also light, and I encountered that, and I felt touched by that light. I felt the warmth of it, I felt the joy of it, and I
Yeah.
wrote that, which is why it is love and loss.
Yes, yes, and that was so it's so true. It's the duality of everything.
Yeah, it's a duality of the human spirit, because these people were sent by the municipality to live in these places. Like Vitabai, who was one of the oldest living people there, like she had been allotted land to live there, and so she came there with this promise from the city that, look, you will be given your own plot of land and you won't be living on the street anymore. And they went there with that, and what they encountered was this vast garbage dump, and they had eked out this impossible life there. So it is
Yeah,
also a testament to the human spirit and gumption and hard
yeah,
work, really.
yeah. Also, in terms of the interest. So, for example, you also talk about how garbage from the rich countries also goes on to the poor countries. So there's a whole the politics of garbage and the economics of garbage that you also talk about,
Yeah.
Soumya. So you want to just tell the viewers a little bit about this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that is something that I'm not written about, but I have followed, which is that waste in developed countries, both in Europe as well as the United States, a lot of it is just shipped out. And for many, this is especially plastic waste or paper or those kinds of things. So for many years, much of this used to go to China, and then China passed a policy in 2018 that said that basically unseparated or like really high grade waste, anything other than that cannot come there. So waste had to find a new location. And
Mm.
if you the way global trade works, as you know, US China trade was pretty high. So everything that China was manufacturing was going to the US, like tremendous amount of manufacturing of goods, from pins up to like semiconductors and cars, and
Yeah.
the smallest to the biggest things consumed in the US were going on barges from China to the US. And what was coming from the US to China in those empty barges was a lot of waste. Right. And so when China passed that policy, that waste was just redirected, and a lot of it now goes to Southeast Asian countries. European waste goes to Turkey. Some of it does come to India, like paper waste. When it comes here, it does go into making new paper, and I have written about this. But some of it, like plastic, cannot be recycled and is sometimes found in garbage dumps in India and in other countries. I did a story where I found that. Your waste, I think it was from Europe, and on that occasion it was paper waste that came from Europe to India. It was found in a go down in Navi Mumbai, and it was way more than what they had said it was, and it was unclear that it could be recycled.
Oh.
So the National Green Tribunal had done a, whether you call it a raid or a tour or whatever, to see these go downs, and they found that the what was sent and what was received in India was like, what was received was way more than what was sent. So all this waste from Western countries, I think it was Europe on that occasion, was just lying around here.
So, Soumya, this is fascinating. And, going back to these people, you also talk about the life expectancy of these people in Embod, the dark side. Let's
Yeah.
explore a little bit about the dark side and what, is the future in terms of the way consumerism is grown, the city is grown, it's expanding uh, uh, at its seams. And you also have now the Navi Mumbai and the extension going, and you see the villages. And we talked a little bit about that evening as well on how the villages have so much plastic without any systems for collection, etc., segregation. So, what can the average person do? I mean, how might we think about this? How do we wrap this around, our head? What is the call for action from the book, and how might you want to waken people? What should be the steps forward?
Sure. I mean, I think sometimes there is obviously that whole conversation about separating waste, etc. But I would not want this conversation. Sometimes that is the inanimate aspect of it, right? And sometimes when we're chasing that, we find ourselves also chasing our tail. Um, and so I would say that yes, while I don't deny that, I would say that the conversation is at two different. I would really like my book to spark two conversations. One, the connection with people who are seemingly different from us.
Beautiful.
What are the lives that our life is spawning,
Yeah,
right? Because we tend to think of those people who live in places like this. They are of a different religion, they are not so educated, and I found that a lot of people kind of like to blame them for that, whereas in
mm,
fact it is our life and our policy that is leading to those lives,
sure, sure.
right?
Very
And I
well
think,
said. Thank
oh, they're
you.
lazy, they're poor because they're lazy, they're poor because they don't like to study. In fact, it's the opposite. They don't study and they are poor because they're forced, because they live there, and really the opportunity to get out of there is so limited.
Correct.
And so I think just living with that awareness, I think as writers our job is just to kind of show that mirror, to
Mirror.
say that look, these
Yeah,
lives are kind of spawned by your life. And I think then it is for people to have that conversation and come up with the conclusions that they come up with of how.
absolutely. Absolutely. So you are doing, journalistically speaking, that giving them a voice, lending them, taking that story from where it was not seen, not heard, and this marginalized person saying, look at how we live, look at our challenges, look at the human connection. And you said that's one part, and that's a very important part of what your book seeks to do.
Yeah, and the other is always the policy aspect of it, right? So it, I think when this 2016 fire happened and there was some arrest made, there was a court case that said that no construction, no further construction can be done in the city, like construction that adds space in the city, without Deonar dumping ground being fixed.
Mm.
And so suddenly there was interest in this court case. And when I asked the waste pickers, they said, नहीं मैडम वो तो कब से चल रहा है, कुछ नहीं होने वाला है, हम तो ऐसे ही रहने वाले हैं. So I'm
Mm.
thinking like these, news headlines and this, is just what they're telling me is not matching. So then I
Yeah.
said, okay, well, why don't I just go to court and see what happens? I go to court and there is all this sound and fury, like, things being banned, things, anger. And I'm like, well, this looks like Devna dumping ground will close tomorrow. And then when I would go to the dumping ground, the waste pickers would be like, नहीं नहीं हम बच्चे थे ना तब से ये court case चल रहा है हमारे भी बच्चे हो गए. Okay, so
Ah,
so then I went back and I started putting in RTI applications to find out what had happened. And sure enough, the date line on the case said the case was is basically 26 years old.
oh,
And if you see the court records over 26 years, it's this constant sound and fury where they're saying, we'll close it, we'll summon the police commissioner, the municipal commissioner, we'll ban this, shut that, all that. So you feel like this is happening tomorrow. But after 26 years, as of today, they're not dumping ground is still receiving waste, right? So
yeah,
it goes to show you just the policy.
correct, correct. And in other developing countries also, there must be very, very similar stories, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Of
Developing but
again,
also developed, right? I feel like in the developed world also, I mean, there is no evidence even today that plastic is highly recyclable,
yeah,
right? So they are actually using more inorganic waste, so lots of packaging, lots of plastic, right? And so the use of these things which don't degrade has gone up tremendously.
mm,
And even there, even at a global level, it's not clear that even, like, say, more than 10% at most of plastic is recyclable,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Again, the whole electronic waste and people living in proximity to that, and the danger to health,
Yeah,
and all the other hazards that happen to the humans there, and overall to the water and the other pollution that happens because of that.
yeah. So they have just bought their way through this, which is to ship the waste out. It doesn't mean that there is a solution for it and that this is a developing world problem. I would argue, this is a developed world problem actually, because they're shipping it out.
Correct. Correct. So where are you on the right? The book now is done. It took you, the process that you did was the interviews and then the writing, and your process as a writer must have been very different writing a novel from writing a piece for a magazine or a newspaper. So
Yeah,
just
it
a little
was.
bit about your writing process and how you fitted that into your everyday other work with the foundation. And I'm just trying to be
Yeah.
curious about a day in the life.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was, as I began to write, it became clear to me that, like, I wanted to highlight their life, and because I had experienced it and how different it was from that darkness that people expected me to encounter. So I definitely wanted to show both aspects of it, which really would make for a way was seeming more rich than I could handle. There was constantly something happening in their life, and that I felt needed to be written. And at the same time, I wanted to show that how it was an impact of policy, that was directly impacting their life. That if this intractable solution, like 26 years, yeah, okay, you could collect 2,000 pages of court papers as I did, but it was important to juxtapose it with what that delay meant for somebody's life, right? So that
Yeah.
really became the scope of the book. And then I actually, I was working in the foundation, but then I began to get lots of writing residencies. I was fortunate to get writing residencies, agents, publishers, all of that. So I began to work less and less with the foundation and more on traveling and writing, and finding writing mentors, agents, publishers, etc. So I would be honest and say that then this story took up most of my time and mind space and all of that. Um, so yeah, I mean, I do tend to write in the mornings. I'm an early riser. I write in the mornings, and then I would go out to report, whether it is to the dumping ground, to the court, to meet different people, like officials, engineers, to talk to me about, like, why can we not resolve this.
Amazing. We're at the last 3 minutes of this conversation that I want it to go on and on, but I know we are closing now. What's the life after the book? What is it? How do you take this forward? This is the 2022, I think, middle of 2022 that you
2021. Yeah.
launched, 2021. And that was again the COVID impact that you also have covered in the book, or by then the writing was all done and it had gone into.
Yeah, actually, the book came out in July 2021. So really, I mean, the impact of COVID is not written about in the book. But since then, I have actually, in the first year or so, I wrote a fair bit more about landfills. Funnily, I mean, it is as if the book was not, I still had more to say. So I've written a lot about, like, I wrote a long magazine piece about the challenges in closing landfills. That really, for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, it becomes so difficult to close a landfill.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it just, and I continue to write on waste. Like last week, I wrote a story for the Guardian newspaper on
Hmm.
an art exhibition of art made entirely with waste, uh, including an artist who makes waste pickers in Dharavi in Mumbai. Um, and he makes these artworks that look like paintings, but they're made with single use plastic. So he collects single use plastic from around the world, takes it to his studio in Los Angeles, color codes it, and then cuts it into strips and presses them onto paper with, like, a clothes iron or something. So it looks like a painting, but it's actually made with single use plastic. And it's off waste pickers, just to show how waste pickers lives are made with our waste.
Amazing. Fascinating. So, Soumya, you are now writing a story on Dharavi. That's the new piece of work. That's the journalistic piece. And do you see writing another book, something that you're also working on, another writing project, a book project?
So I write on waste. I also write. I also continue to write about people who are like, other kinds of communities like this. So I did a long, this is, as you said, it's rightly called Love and Loss. So I also write about, I wrote a long magazine story that was a love story between a Hindu girl and a Muslim boy, and all the challenges that they faced. So that's I look at that also as kind of extension of my work, actually.
Yeah.
Having said that, I right now I'm not working on a book project, just because this particular book project came from just a very deep connection and
Yeah.
years of work. So I'm enjoying writing slightly shorter, finite pieces, and they may eventually add up in terms of writing another book, but at this point they have not yet come together in that way.
So I'm going to thank our guest, and I'm going to invite all of watching this to read the book. It was almost like a film as I was listening to Saumya. I could visualize, but it takes, I think, a lot of courage to go outside of one's comfort, to go and study the lives of someone so different, and to actually not let a number or a statistic, but really to humanize, to and that's really about building a inclusive and a truly a society where we are sensitive and human and truly practicing being human. So thank you so much, Soumya, for this conversation, so rich. And I wish you all the best and lots of energy to in all the work that you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And really, you've been such a wonderful influence in my life in all the interactions we've had. So this is really a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Soumya.